Hey everyone, it's Teacher Mike here. Today we have another English Conversations. Hoje a gente vai vai ter mais uma conversa que eu fiz em inglês com a Luana, uma grande amiga minha. Ela é intérprete aqui. Ela trabalha com empresas, em projetos. Ela traduz simultaneamente reuniões com esses projetos. E a gente fez uma English Conversations. A gente conversou em inglês sobre o trabalho dela. Ela é formada em Letras. Ela tem mestrado, 2 mestrados eu acho. Então a gente conversou um pouco sobre isso. Um pouco sobre o futuro, que tem uma pessoa que estuda letras e talvez queira se mudar. Então talvez esse vídeo seja interessante pra você também por causa disso. Eu tô editando o vídeo nesse momento aqui. Ok? Tô editando aqui. E a questão é que o áudio ficou um pouquinho baixo. Então preste bem atenção no vídeo. Dá pra ouvir. Só ficou um pouquinho baixo. Porque o meu microfone que eu uso seu celular pra gravar ficou um pouquinho... ficou um pouquinho, mas tudo bem. Você consegue ouvir, você consegue entender. Então vambora, sem mais delongas. Presta atenção no vídeo. Valeu, Luana. Um beijo no coração aí. A gente vai se ver bastante. E tomara que o futuro guarde coisas incríveis pra você, como eu acho que ele guarda, ok? See you guys soon. And o áudio também tá disponível no podcast, então vejam lá. E é isso aí, ok? Aproveitem o vídeo. Hey everyone, it's Teacher Mike here. This is another English conversation, so we're going to speak in English with someone that is, she's from Brazil as well. And we are friends for a long time, but it had been a while since the last time we met. And that's it. We used this moment to catch up, and now we're going to talk a little bit about her, about what she does here. And she works in like some very important, with some very important projects here, so she's in a higher level than we're used to, but it's super interesting, and she can show you guys and give you some perspective on the things you can do. So yeah, first of all, let's talk a little bit about yourself. What's your field of study first, and then what do you do here? And your name, by the way.
Hi everyone, I'm Luana. So I've graduated in languages in Brazil. I have a master's degree in translation and a master's degree in interpretation here in Canada. So the difference between translation and interpretation is that when we talk about translation, we're talking about written documents, whereas interpretation, it's more of a oral communication. So you may see that, I don't know, whenever you're watching UFC and then a speaker speaks English and there's this translator, aka interpreter, who will say it back, whatever he said in Portuguese, so you'll understand. And you've heard interpreters in the Oscars ceremony as well, but it's not all we do. We also work with conferences. So if there is I don't know, a foreign speaker in your country, he can speak English and you can hear the interpreter through headphones if you're sitting at the audience. So these are the kinds of things that the interpreter does.
Interpreter can do.
Yeah.
Well, right off the bat, like, it's interesting to see how your English is, because when you compare to, because we had never spoken in English before.
No, we haven't.
So when we compare your English to a lot of English speakers that I see, it's like you have less accent than I have. So it's very.
I'm flattered.
It's kind of incredible. So it's amazing. So you're an interpreter, and all right. So first question about interpreters. What do you think of the interpreters of the Oscars?
I feel for them. It's a very hard job because, as you may foresee, an interpreter does not interpret just words, but you have to interpret the intent and maybe the jokes. And most of the jokes in the Oscar ceremony are very focused to that very audience. So even if they try and interpret that joke, it may not make sense in Portuguese.
Yeah, and it's super difficult, by the way, to translate a joke. I mean, they're out of those cultural backgrounds that a joke has. That makes it harder. And if you can you talk a little bit about what you do right now in your job?
So I mentioned different ways interpreter works, and now I'm working here as a staff interpreter. So I work for a company. They are a consulting company, and all of their customers, or all of their clients, are banks. So it's mainly digital and finance. Mm-hmm. So I work for this company because they have a Brazilian client. So mainly what I do is I participate or I attend all their meetings because I have to facilitate communication between the Brazilian client and my bosses who are here or mainly in English-speaking countries such as the US or
That's amazing.
Europe.
Yeah, and then you have to be with them in their meetings, and you have to be aware of their projects. in order that you can communicate effectively, right? All right. So before we jump into, I think we have more things to talk about your job and projects, but let's talk a little bit about like if you have found any differences between the work environment from Brazil and here, or any culture difference that has had any effect on you, or if there are any.
There are many.
Really? Oh, that's interesting.
Brazilians are very different from, let's say Canadians, because we're in Canada.
Let's say
right?
Canadians.
Brazilians are very emotional and they express their emotions very intensely. So, and this is very, it's crystal clear when I'm in meetings with my bosses here in Canada, because they know exactly when the Brazilians are happy with our work and when they're upset with our work.
Oh, that's
because they are
interesting.
very passionate. So when they're happy, they will really tell you, and when they are angry or upset or disappointed,
You can see that like they will show you.
they will. And the idea is that, and that's so funny, because if you do 100 things right and then you do one thing wrong, they'll forget about the 100 things that you did right, and they'll just point out to the wrong thing, which is okay. I think I'm not criticizing, because I'm Brazilian and I'm sort of like that in a way.
Yeah.
And I like being told, I mean, it's nice to know exactly how the person's feeling about your work, because if you're doing well, then you're getting that feedback, and if you're doing something that it's not exactly what they want, you're also getting that feedback, so you don't make that mistake again. So in a way, it's very revealing, and for me, it's just amazing to see how Brazilians work and to compare it to how my bosses work. And for them, it was very much a shock to sort of deal with that kind of client. Yeah.
That's very interesting. I did not expect that answer at all. Like,
What were you
I mean, I
expecting?
understand that we are very emotional and we tend to show that, but I did not, because I haven't worked in that 9 to 5 environment, so I had no idea that would be that much of a contrast. So it's super interesting. I think it makes total sense. After you said it, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, super interesting. Right. So let's go and talk about that little story you told me about, that you had to translate a word. So the word in Portuguese is vaquinha, right? And you had to translate it for an app or something, right?
Yeah.
So how was that whole thing?
So the idea is that we are developing. I'm not saying the name of the company here, but there are several functionalities. Mainly, our client.
You think it's alright if we talk about this?
Yeah, it's fine. So, in general, we are the great challenge here, and actually, this is very cool because I like a good challenge. Is that all the work that we've been doing is to a specific target audience in Brazil, which are the millennials. And the thing about this is that they want to make it in a sort of millennial language type thing, in a way that you feel comfortable and you feel happy, or you feel close to that person or even that app that you're in contact with. So let me give you an example. My sister, she is using that very product that was launched in Brazil, and that was the work of my company.
Yeah.
And my sister is a millennial.
Yeah.
And she had an issue with her app, and she had to interact with the chat. But her chat was just not working, so he just tweeted the company, and she got a reply back in in a couple of minutes, very quick. And the reply was and I got this feedback from her, and I even told my boss about it. She said it felt as if I was speaking to a friend of mine, which was very cool.
That is amazing.
So this is the kind of, I think this is one of the million intentions this project have of getting closer to their target
audience.
Now, if you think of my perspective or the people who are working on this, and especially me, who's actually having to deal with this language, sometimes we encounter several expressions that are just untranslatable, or sometimes, and this is an eternal fight I have with all my colleagues here, because we have some privacy issues. So some websites, we're dealing with banks here, so some websites such as Google Translate cannot be used because you can't just put something the client sends you into Google Translate, because you're just exposing that.
Yeah.
But one sentence or another, people just Google Translate because they're actually interested in seeing what it means.
Yeah.
So sometimes if you Google Translate a sentence written down by a millennial, you may get something that's a bit different from what they're trying to
That's
say.
awesome.
And this happened with several words within the project, such as vaquinha. What we're trying to say was actually like some sort of crowdfunding where
Yeah.
you gather money to do something.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, you guys probably know. Vaquinha is when you grab a few people and you say, hey, listen, we need to buy this thing here for donation, and then everyone kind of donates a little bit of money. And then this word doesn't exist in English at all. So you translate it to crowdfunding, and that's it?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I tried to find a similar word, but once I explained this to my bosses, they actually found that they would just rather use the term vaquinha because they found it cute, and there's this little logo of a vaquinha, so they tried
that's super
to,
cool.
So some words were actually not translated, such as vaquinha or bolero.
Oh, wow.
Boleto, we would call they call it
Bolero.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
And other challenges that we had were, let's say, for example, there's a text message that would say, "Poxa, você não tem saldo." So they would Google that and say, "Hey, what does that mean exactly?" So those kind of things.
Nice. How do you translate Porsche?
Well, it depends
That's hard.
on the whole
On the whole
context, but sometimes I would do something like or
that's good.
like trying to challenge myself into finding a millennial version in English.
A millennial version that also connects the audience, right? Because when you say, I imagine that if I receive a message from the bank saying Porsche, I'll be like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Right? That's super interesting. And all right, yeah. So another thing that Luana here is doing, she's helping with the recruitment for a job opportunity in Brazil, and she actually gets calls and like creates a type of simulation and talks in English with those people that are applying for the job. So a lot of you guys, and I get this question a lot, like a lot of my followers, they ask me and they tell me they have a job interview that is in English and yada 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 and some recommendations. So maybe you are the best person to give those recommendations to them and maybe talk a little bit about your challenges on that.
I can actually draw a parallel that I think that may help your audience. The idea is that whenever I'm recruiting a translator or an interpreter, those are professionals who uses language as their primary tool. So whenever I'm recruiting an interpreter or a translator, I really want them to excel.
Wow.
Now, I've been involved in recruitment before, back when I lived in Brazil, and the main thing, and I think this is very important to say, is that whenever you're being interviewed for a job, but your main tool is not the language itself, but you're rather applying to be a programmer or something else entirely.
I see.
You have to bear in mind that you don't need to speak perfect English. That's the main idea of it, but you do need to be able to communicate your ideas in a way. So for example, at the company I work for, there are several people from different backgrounds. So I've worked with Indians, I've worked with Chinese, I've worked with different people, and all of them, they do not have English as a first language. However, they're here in Canada and they have a job here and they're doing their job well just because they have enough to be able to communicate in a way that they can do their work. So if it's either a business analyst or a programmer or whatever, they can do it very well. So I think that the main point here, and obviously we all want to speak English very well, but I think that the main point is that you don't have to feel like you can be in an interview in English only when you have perfect English. That's not
awesome.
the point at
That's
all.
a great tip.
Right?
Yeah.
You have to just feel comfortable with what you do and how you do things, and be able to explain how you do things. So I think the main point is, and another parallel that we have is that, I don't know if you can tell this or if this is just my impression, but I feel like if we compare Brazilians to French or the Japanese or the others who are speaking English as a second language, I feel that Brazilians are so much focused on pronunciation rather than the other groups.
Yeah, I can tell this for sure.
Right?
And I get, just hold your idea, but very
Sure.
quickly, I get this a lot when I'm teaching someone that is very basic, and I'm trying to make them feel comfortable using the words and, widening their vocabulary, and they get mad at me sometimes because I haven't corrected them on a few mistakes that they've made in pronunciation. But my goal is, don't worry about it right now, and I just want to make sure you're comfortable, and then after we can fix that, right? So this happens a lot. So yeah, keep going.
Yeah, so I think that the main point, and I say this because I'm sure you know, I've taught English a long time before I moved here. So
Yeah.
I think the idea is, I'm not saying it's bad that Brazilians are worried about pronunciation. I think this is great.
No, it's pretty good.
But we also have to make sure that we already have what we already know how to communicate.
Exactly.
And then later you can just polish and then adjust your pronunciation.
I totally agree. And another thing that is interesting about that is because if you worry too much about your pronunciation, you will feel uncomfortable. You're going to be thinking of the things you don't have instead of thinking of the things you have. Like if you're able to communicate effectively and you don't have that pronunciation, it's okay because you're going to be fine in that job interview. It's not going to be a whole problem, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about the challenges that you have while recruiting Brazilians, like some mistakes they make? You know, people make mistakes, it's okay. Just have to make it better.
I think that I don't know, about recruiting, I think that people just have to be, whichever field you're applying for, you just have to be aware of the qualifications that you'll have to have.
Yeah, self-awareness.
Exactly, and just make sure that you can communicate them well.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens a lot in Brazil. I know that whenever they say English is needed, so usually the interviewer will start your interview in Portuguese and then they'll switch to English just to see how you behave, right? So as long as the person who's applying is ready to make that flip and not be nervous or worried. And mainly, I think bottom line is, if you are applying for a job which does not require where language is a tool but it's not your main work, then and you may get this all the time, and people say this to me all the time. They go, oh, but your English is so perfect, why are you still studying, what are you doing? But English, like the language is our tool. Like, we have to be better. We have to study more. We have to read. We have to keep going
all the time.
Right? So I think that's in a way how you have to approach whenever you go into an interview. Like, if you're using English just to communicate what you do, or if you actually have to prove, which is what happens with me when I'm recruiting, because I'm recruiting translators and interpreters. So they actually have to prove to me or to show me that they have that kind of proficiency, right?
They are not only using their communication as a tool, but they're also using that as their main job. Like, that's the reason why they're being hired. All right, I mean, that's super awesome. That's already 60 minutes. I don't want to take too much of your time. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I'm super happy.
It's my pleasure to be here in this channel.
Yeah, all right, guys. That's it. It's going to be on the podcast as well, and you guys can listen to it. Luana, thank you so much, and I hope I didn't take too much of your time.
No, not at all. Thank you.
All right. See you guys.